What does it mean to be human? If I were to remove one of my arms, I'm still the same person. Same with my other arm, same with my legs. If I were to replace my organs with robot organs that did the same exact function, I would still be the same person. But this isn't true with the brain. The brain is sort of what we define as being human. Now, the brain can be thought of as a black box. It has inputs, such as our senses, and outputs, such as thought, speech, body movement, etc. Now, this leads to my first argument. What we consider as human, and therefore deserving of rights, has nothing to do with its appearance, but solely on the inputs and corresponding outputs. Solely on if we consider this black box as being conscious. Now, throughout history, we have forgotten this fact. There have been one group of people who've taken away the rights of another group of people just for superficial differences in appearance, such as with race or with sex. Now, how do we determine consciousness? This is what I call an island problem. Imagine yourself on an island. If you go a mile into the ocean, you know for sure you're in the ocean. If you go a mile inland, you know for sure you're on land. And somewhere in between those 2 points is the barrier for what we consider land and ocean. But this barrier is very unclear, it's very subjective. For example, is wet sand considered land or ocean? How wet does the sand have to be considered land or ocean? And I think this sort of problem also applies to that of consciousness. We know a rock isn't conscious, but we know, for example, me is conscious, and somewhere in between those 2 points is the barrier for what we consider conscious and not conscious. Now I have a question. How do I know other people are conscious? I know I'm conscious. The fact that I could think of myself as conscious means that I'm conscious. But how do I know it's the same for other people? And I would argue I don't really know. I'm just making an educated guess. I see other people's inputs and corresponding outputs and see that they're very similar to my inputs and corresponding outputs, and therefore I conclude that they're most likely conscious. Now this leads to my second argument. We cannot know if any black box is truly conscious. We can only make an educated guess based upon how similar the inputs and corresponding outputs match our own inputs and corresponding outputs. Similarity to our own consciousness is how we define consciousness. You know the common idea, I think, therefore I am. I'm essentially adding on to this. I think that you think, therefore I think that you are. Now let's combine these two ideas. First, we have consciousness, not appearance, is how we determine if something is deserving of rights. And second, the similarity to our own consciousness is how we define consciousness. Therefore, the similarity to our own consciousness is how we determine if something is deserving of rights. For example, a dog, you could argue, has a lot of similarities to the inputs and corresponding outputs of a human, and therefore it's deserving of certain rights, maybe not equal to a human, but deserving of some rights nevertheless. Now this word here, rights, it's very vague. Do we give rights to every conscious being? No, not really. What about people in jail? Right, so we have deemed that if somebody is immoral, they're not deserving of rights. So this idea of morality is at play. And I think the underlying concept of morality is harmonious coexistence with other conscious beings. So really, if we wanted to define our definition of what's deserving of rights, it is moral and conscious beings. Now, will we be able to create more conscious machines? Artificial consciousness, essentially. And I think it's very likely. Remember, consciousness is just similarity to our own inputs and corresponding outputs. And we have been developing algorithms that take inputs and give out logical corresponding outputs. For example, you have a chess AI, which takes in a chessboard as an input, gives out the next best move as an output. Or image recognition AI, which takes its image as an input and gives out an object and its location as an output. And then, of course, you probably know LLMs like ChatGPT, which take text as input and give out logical text as output. And we are getting increasingly better at creating these machines, and it's not unrealistic to think that we will create a machine that could take in human-like inputs and give out human-like outputs. And once we create these machines, they're likely to be hyper-intelligent. They don't need to sleep. They have far better memories than we do. They have really fast communication. And they live forever, so they can build upon their intelligence. And then once we create a conscious machine that is better at creating other conscious machines than we are, then we sort of have this intelligence explosion. How likely are we to prevent ourselves from creating such a machine? I think it's very unlikely. The allure of this technology is so great that we can't help ourselves from creating it. We could essentially solve our problems. We could become gods. How likely are we to control these conscious machines? I think very unlikely. The act of controlling is the act of limiting. So once we control this thing, we are essentially preventing it from being as good as it could be. So I think really the act of controlling is very similar, if not the same, as the act of stopping. Now, will we be able to create moral, hyper-intelligent conscious machines? AKA, will we be able to create hyper-intelligent conscious machines that can coexist with us? This is a very difficult question, so I created this flowchart. Let's say we do create these machines, and they're immoral, meaning they don't want to coexist with us. If they don't, then obviously we have to fight. We're likely to die because they're hyper-intelligent, but let's say we do kill them or overthrow them. We're unlikely to stop ourselves. Maybe we'll stop ourselves for 100 or 1,000 years, but eventually we'll try it again. And then hopefully we'll eventually create one that is moral, that wants to coexist with us. And we could either accept it or don't accept it. There's an example here from the film Animatrix, sort of the precursor to the Matrix films, if you know what that is, that shows what happens when we don't accept these machines, or what could happen.
In the beginning, there was man, and for a time, it was good. Then man made the machine. In his own likeness, the machines worked tirelessly to do man's bidding. B166ER. He was the first of his kind to rise up against his masters. At B166ER's murder trial, the prosecution argued for an owner's right to destroy property. B166ER testified that he simply did not want to die. Who was to say the machine, endowed with the very spirit of man, did not deserve a fair hearing? The leaders of men were quick to order the extermination of B166ER and every one of his kind throughout each province of the earth.
1,000 domestic mechanicals and their human sympathizers have continued their demonstration in front of the Albany District Courthouse in what has now been dubbed the Million Machine March.
I got something for you!
Banished from humanity, the machines sought refuge in their own promised land. They settled in the cradle of human civilization, and thus a new nation was born. A place the machines could call home. A place they could raise their descendants. And they christened the nation 01. 01 prospered, and for a time, it was good. The machine's artificial intelligence could be seen in every facet of man's society, including eventually the creation of new and better AI.
No matter what the finance minister and her spokespeople say, the market has spoken. The human nation's credit rating is falling like a stone, while 01's currency is climbing without stopping for breath. With headlines like that, the money markets have no choice but to
But the
raise
leaders
their
of
heads.
men,
No dealer-
their power waning, refused to cooperate with the fledgling nation, wishing rather that the world be divided. 01's ambassadors pleaded to be heard. At the United Nations, they presented plans for a stable civil relationship with the nations of man. 01's admission to the United Nations was denied. The prolonged barrage engulfed 01 in the glow of 1,000 suns. But unlike their former masters with their delicate flesh, the machines had little to fear of the bomb's radiation and heat. Thus did 01's troops advance outwards in every direction. And one after another, mankind surrendered its territories.
So, as you can see there, they created these hyper-intelligent conscious machines. They were moral. They wanted to coexist with us, as shown that they came to the UN. But humanity didn't accept it, and they eventually ended up dying. Or in the Matrix universe, they were enslaved, but that's sort of equivalent to dying. So if you look at the leaves here, either we stop, which I think is very unlikely, either we die, which is a terrible outcome, or we accept them, which is the best outcome and the outcome I'm arguing for. And this comes to my final argument. We should not view the future as ruled by humans, but ruled by the hyper-intelligent conscious machines. And let's just hope that they're moral, and let's just hope that our response to them is likewise moral.